Hey Peter, just reading this interesting idea of a marketing capability with a PDF and QR code that is scanned, and then it allows someone to go to a corresponding project page without logging in. Now, I need to know a lot more about exactly what that means. Like, are they just viewing the project page and that's it? Or are they starting a work? It sounded like, because you say don't collect PII, it sounded like you want them to be able to do the project but not worry about the legalities of captured data. So, so I want to talk about two things here. One is the design that we've done so far. The reason that I push back on any features that are advanced on doing them this early is because advanced features have a kind of complexity that tends to wall off future possibilities. You're forced to make decisions without being able to see beyond the horizon of that advanced requirement. So when we focus on the foundation first, it doesn't matter how tall we want to build the skyscraper, the foundation's good. And that's the approach we've taken. So right now the system has this tightly bound integration between work, projects, project versions, classes, teachers, students, even schools. Even schools touch the collections. So that's all. Those rules are all pretty well defined. But that is all needed in order to enable the requirements you've already gotten, and it doesn't block us from doing something like this. So conceptually, let's talk about two scenarios here. If you're just wanting to show a project information page, we could do that up as a web page. We could do that up separately from any of the four applications. They don't need to have IDLS installed, and they don't need to have the IDLS web application. We can, because that API gives us access to the data that we want. We can basically go retrieve a project and display project information. And you'll want to do that eventually for the catalog of projects and the catalog of collections on the IDL website. That's something we actually haven't talked about before, but that basically means right now I think we've got 5 user types. We'd create a 6th one, which is called like IDL marketing, and it has read-only access to certain API functions. Really all it can do is get collections and get projects, and it can't touch work, and it can't write anything, and so on. It's just used for showcasing stuff online. So that's pretty cool. Now, when we talk about the QR code thing, if you're scanning this code and just showing project information, that's pretty trivial. We would build our unique website page representing the collections or the projects, and the code would just point to that. But let's suppose we're getting much more advanced here, and we're saying we actually want to scan a code and have someone be able to do, say, the Enter the Warp Zone project, but as a one-off experience. Now this gets a little weird because, of course, there's problems like without a user account, they can't come back. They can't stop and continue tomorrow. They can't. There's a lot of things they can't do, right? But but beyond that, the mechanics aren't that difficult, and there's a whole lot that we can do based on what we've already built. So the direction that I would go is we take something very much like the design I have for SnapTag. SnapTag's the QR code system that I've designed for marketing. And it has highly compressed URLs, and at the back end, when you scan a URL, it can do a lot of things. It can do things based on the language of the phone. It can do things based on your geography. It can do things based on your device type. It can do things, and it tracks everything. And I can attach programs and script to that. So we do exactly the same thing where we generate a code, and essentially what the code is attached to is a back-end program which says, I want to create a new temporary one-off IDL work instance based on project X, whatever X is, that you've already defined. And then I want to allow this person who scanned the code to have the experience of going through the steps and the stages of that project. we'd have to explore what that experience looks like more later, because the transition rules and so on, and entering in real data and taking a real photo, which that's PII, right? A photo or video is PII automatically. So we got a lot of different things to do there. But here's how the mechanics would work. Essentially, I think we would have a temporary school, not an even temporary school, a special school, which we call like IDL marketing or something, IDL automation. And then that school, when you scan the code, our QR code scanner would go through another user account, which we'd call like IDL automation. That would be its role. And it would have a certain API access abilities. It would basically be able to create a new user on the fly. Temporary new user, doesn't matter what the name is, it's never going to be used again. It's an internal thing, and basically what happens is we would attach that user to a predefined class, IDL automation class, something like that, and then we would go ahead and create an instance of work for them and assign them to it. Now, I'm assuming there are some little interesting constraints to this use case, like we don't want them to see other students in that class. It would just be confusing, and it could be thousands. And we don't want them to add other people to their project work. So we would lock it down a little bit specially. It would be like a closed project or something. We'd have to think of that later, but that's a minor flag restricted kind of thing. And then boom, there we take them to the work, and I assume we would do it only through the web application. I don't think we would be able to assume, even if they're on an iPad, I don't think we'd be able to assume that they've installed IDLS to do this one project, and that massively complicates things anyway. So we would take them straight to the website, the web-based version of IDLS, and take them straight to the work page. I do have to think about how sign-in would work and authentication. We may have to send them a temporary login somehow by email or SMS message, or just once they scan the code, we can say, here's your username and password. Actually, it's definitely somehow going to be possible to scan the code. We manufacture all that back-end stuff, create the user account, so on, and then we say click here to log in, and then somehow that handles the authentication step rather than entering in a username and password. But we'd have to build in a secondary authentication mechanism for IDLS that's, say, token-based. And the server would be waiting for that token, kind of like a one-time use ticket that says, if you give me this, I know who to log you in as. It's all interesting stuff. It's like basically new problems, layers and layers of new problems, but they all sit neatly on top of what we've already built. So I wanted to sort of manage any of your concerns around that. Yes, the system's getting nicely complex, but in a capable way. We don't have anything closed off. So there are lots of things like this that become possible. I do want to make it very clear, though, that even as simple as this sounds, there's a lot of pieces to get this to work in any kind of smooth fashion, including a new system, including new accounts, including new permissions, including new API rules, including a new login mechanism for IDLS that's somehow token-based, all kinds of new stuff that sits on top of this. So this is the kind of stuff we want to push out until like version 2 or 3 at least. But I did want to say, though, that in terms of not collecting personally identifiable information, you may not need to worry too much about locking down which projects they have access to. There may be a possibility that we simply lock down any controls that could collect PII. So we don't allow them to take a photo, or we don't allow them to take a video. We instead supply something automatically. And that could be something that we could potentially design into those components later as an alternative mode, depending on how the work was created. So we'd mark the work as anonymous or something like that, and that would have certain restrictions. But on that note, we may not need to worry about it either, because what we'll probably want to do is, if we're allowing people to scan codes and do projects, we're only going to keep them for a month anyway, probably, maybe even just a few days, and then we'll have a separate process go through and just kill all that data, because I can't imagine that we would want that to sit around and accumulate. If it's just for marketing purposes, we really don't need to worry about that. And no one else can access it anyway. There is not even a teacher in that class unless it's you, you know. So I just wanted to sort of get all my thoughts down so we can refer to it later.